All right, we're gonna get started. I appreciate you coming to this. I know with breakout sessions, it's always hard to pick which one to go to. Hopefully this will be valuable. I'm gonna try to squish like a 3-day workshop on like 7 ways to make your team better into 40 minutes. So that's probably not gonna go well. If we run out of time for questions, I'll be at the happy hour after. We can talk as much as you want. I'm Dan Chuparkoff. I am pretty easy to find on the internet. I'm the only Chuparkoff that hasn't been arrested. So, but connect with me on LinkedIn, go to my own website. But LinkedIn, I'd love to interact with you. I'd love to hear the products that you're building in the world. I'd love to help you all make them better. I'd like to hear the successes you have and the struggles too, because that makes us all better. So today we're going to talk about the future of product management, as I believe, and it's going to be a little different than some of the things that you hear all the time. So first, let's pretend we're all in the audience of an orchestra, and the orchestra's playing music. I'm in the audience with you. The musicians are warming up, and then as they start playing, you start to realize, wait, they're not all playing the same song. There's people, it seems like some of them are changing songs in the middle of the song. And then you look closer and you notice there's no sheet music in front of any of them. And there's no conductor. There's nothing at all helping them play together. Some guy in a tuba just stands up and starts belting out a solo because he's trying to get promoted. And then a couple other soloists jump up as well, and they start all trying to play solos louder than the other one. There's some new people in the orchestra. They've actually just started. They've never played any instruments before, but they heard about playing instruments in college. And then finally, the band didn't actually have enough resources to get instruments for everyone, so like 11 of the people are just humming. What does this music sound like? This is horrible noise. It's excruciating. You can't deal with it for very long. It sounds like jazz. No, I'm just kidding. Jazz doesn't have those issues. It has different ones. But our teams actually do have those issues. Our strategy is changing all the time. Our new people don't have the resources they need to get up to speed quickly. Our teams don't have the tools or the resources or the facilities that they need to be successful. And so the music that our teams are playing together sounds like garbage. So we're going to try to fix some of that today. It's going to be hard. It takes a lot of work. Our teams are struggling, and there are reasons for that, and I'm going to dive into some of them today. So it used to be true that product managers were really interface managers. We were responsible for some dashboard somewhere, some web interface. We were responsible for talking to our users and figure out what's missing from the dashboard. What do you want there next? And we get a bunch of people with different ideas and we prioritize them. And that's great. We need that. But these days, product managers are responsible for so much more than just that. Because all of us can write whatever we want in a strategy, but if our team doesn't get those things done, we're not going to find the success we need. Our company's not going to keep existing. Having a strategy and actually getting that work done are both important. It might be true that getting the work done is more important. So all of this is being placed on product managers as the coordinators between a bunch of cross-functional people. We have to talk to stakeholders, we have to talk to our developers, we have to find a way to imagine the future and convince all our stakeholders that that's the right future. And that's getting harder and harder because in the last 6 decades, we've had some of the most transformative technologies that the world has ever seen. Back in 1995, around when I first got started, not to date myself, we got PCs on our team, and it changed the way we interacted with information. And then by 2000, all our teams had the web, and we started sharing data over oceans in real time, and that was pretty cool. And then in 2005, we got the BlackBerry, and so now we could send email and be in meetings at the same time. So we did twice as much of both. So then in 2010, we started pushing our data into the cloud. And in 2015, we needed data science and machine learning to pull that data back out and make sense of it. And in 2020, our teams started to scatter. Some of that was because of COVID, but also well before COVID, our teams were starting to need to scatter because it was getting harder and harder to recruit the talent that we needed in the zip code that we happened to buy an office in. And so these changes have come like clockwork every 5 years, and they're massive. Every single one of the things on this list is probably changing most of your lives. And that's going to keep happening, right? Generative AI, and then robotics, and then probably quantum computing after that. That's what the next 15 years are going to look like. I've worked on a lot of different teams. Teams like Atlassian, where I worked on JIRA, or McKinsey & Company, where I did some healthcare stuff. Worked at Google until a week ago. I just left Google to do a new venture, which I'll tell you about at happy hour. But on all of these teams, I also got to work with our customers. And so I got to figure out, like, what are the struggles on teams all over the world? And the most important thing that I've learned is that the way teams work isn't changing fast enough. We've got all these changes coming at us from every direction every single day. And the way we were working is mostly the same as it was in 1997. We've digitized all the stuff, but we haven't disrupted it. The most important product that you are building is the team that builds the stuff that you're delivering your customers. It doesn't matter what you put in the strategy if your team can't build stuff fast enough, if they can't learn stuff fast enough. And so today we're going to dive into some of this stuff, and some of this stuff is going to sound like stuff, dude, I can't do that. That's my boss's boss's boss has to do that. And you, as the product manager, influence stakeholders all the time. And this is one of the ways you will start influencing stakeholders, and you'll build more stuff, you'll build better value for your users, and these are some of the ways you're going to do this. Now, is this really important? How important is it? It's pretty important. A study from McKinsey showed that in 1980, the average major company, like companies on the S&P 500, lasted 36 years before bankruptcy or solvency or whatever. Today, that's less than 18 years. It's half. 75% of the companies currently on the S&P 500 won't exist by the end of this decade. That's massive. So if we want to not be one of those statistics, there's two things that we have to figure out how to get better at. There's actually more, but I'm going to talk about two of them today. The first thing we have to do is change more, and the second thing we have to do is get more done. Now, some of you say, that's kind of obvious. People are telling me to change more and get more done all the time. I'm hopefully going to start helping you figure out how to do those things. So if we want to change more, we're going to have to learn faster. And if we want to get more done, we're going to have to find some things to stop doing. We're adding new stuff to our plate all the time, but we're not taking any of the old things off. So we're going to dive into those two things. So first, we're going to build a muscle for adapting to change. And then secondly, we're going to build a muscle for accelerating the way we work. So there are new tools, new technologies coming at us every day. We have to integrate with more and more teams inside of our organization. We have to integrate with partner teams outside of our organization. We have to gradually broaden our talent base, so now it's including people that speak different languages and have different culture needs and all kinds of things. There's new stuff coming at us all the time. But the way we learn is still the same. We haven't made hardly any progress in accelerating our learning. This is a raise your hand thing, although I might only get a few people. How many people learned everything that they need to know back in college? Anyone? I usually get one guy. It's always a guy. Of course not. The things we learned in school, no matter when we went to school, the world's changing all the time, and so those things fall out of date really quickly. So our career span used to look like this. We spent a couple of decades at the beginning of our life getting some fundamentals, and then we picked a specialty. We went to college or an apprenticeship program or some other way of getting a skill, and then we tried to do that thing for 40 years. And then hopefully, if we're lucky, we maybe retire and play golf or bridge or whatever old people do. Now, I think in a world that's changing constantly, there's not going to be very much stuff that I could do right now for 40 more years without changing it. So our career's actually going to look a little more like this. It's a gradient, gradual change about every 10 years to something that's radically different. And you're going to keep doing that over time. And this doesn't even begin to address the fact that 40 years from now, people might not retire at 65 or die at 85. Hopefully the numbers are higher. We'll see how it goes. But to survive in a world of continuous change, we need to build a practice for continuous learning. And most organizations, most people actually aren't very good at that at all. So here's one of the ways I do it for myself and my teams. This is what I call the learn equation. And basically it goes like this. If you think your world needs to be radically different 5 years from now, spend 20% of your time preparing for that future. Every year you spend 20% of your time, and by the time 5 years from now gets here, you'll be pretty good at that thing. This is one of the reasons Google invented 20% time in the first place, because Google does believe that 5 years from now is pretty important, and we should actually prioritize getting ready for that future. So that's pretty aggressive. Not all of our teams believe that the future is going to be that disruptive. So this works for any duration. Let's say you believe 10 years from now, 2033, your world is going to look different. So spend 10% of your time each year. That's about a half day every Friday. Spend 10% of your time learning what that 10 years from now future will look like. That will make you better at understanding what you thought was going to happen that didn't. It'll make you more practiced at making strategies that actually come true. And 10 years doesn't have to be the number either. Maybe you're in a regulated industry or an industry that is more capital intensive and so change is slower. 20 years means 5% of your time learning. That's about 2 hours a day, 2 hours a week, I'm sorry. The problem is most organizations actually only spend 2% or less. So a lot of organizations will let you go to one conference a year. Or they'll hire a consultant to come into your team and do a workshop for 4 or 5 days. Those things are great. They really help teams get better, learn new skills. It exposes you to different ideas, but that can't be enough. 2% of your time is only preparing you for a future that's 50 years away. And I can pretty much guarantee that everything about everything is going to change before 2073. So figure out what your learn equation needs to look like. And this is for you. It's for your developers. It's also for your customers. Your customers are going through this same journey. So prioritize learning inside of your products for them as well, because they need to change just like you need to change. And learning, investing in a future that's changing all the time, it needs to be a priority. If you don't do this, if you don't help your customers learn, then all of a sudden, 5 years from now, you're going to surprise them with a completely new interface, and they're going to reject you. That doesn't go that well. So help them learn too. So here's the formula again, the number 100 by the number of years you think before change needs to be necessary, and that gives you how much time you should invest. So that's hard, and figuring that out all the time is hard too, and what does 2 hours a week really even matter? But one of the ways I've used to try to actually bring learning into my organizations is by having a learnathon. So a learnathon is just like a hackathon. You spend 3 or 4 days learning new stuff, trying some experiments, getting deep into a subject. But it's important that everyone on the team is learning different stuff. Because what you want is a bunch of people exploring a bunch of different things. And what that does, then everyone comes back on Friday and they talk about why they picked learning that thing that they picked and what they learned. They give the other teammates a summary and then how it's going to change the business and what they think they should do with it next. And when you do that, it starts to bring new awareness of new tools and technologies and ways of solving customer value challenges that didn't get priority before. So that's learnathons. That's one of the ways you can start building a learning muscle in your organization. So I know what some of you are thinking, I don't have every Friday to spend learning. I wish I did. I'm already super behind by the end of Thursday. I definitely can't take Friday off just for reading or watching YouTube. So we're going to dive into that more. Accelerate is the second muscle that you have to get good at. So we're living in a world of exponential growth of everything. So another hand raising, who wishes they had more time or got more things done? Anybody? Some people are like, I don't care, but my boss wishes I got more done. Of course, all of us we're running out of time. Like, because we're inventing new things to do every day, but we're not like extending our week or taking the old things off. So there's more expected of us every day because our projects are getting more agile, more incremental. We're working on smaller and smaller iterations. Sometimes we're working on things that we don't even think we're going to need, but we call them experiments. Those are good, but it's just more work for us all to do. We're also expanding our customer bases. Now sometimes our customer bases are global, and we're trying to interconnect our products with partners. There's an exponentially growing amount of stuff that we have to do every day. So we've got to start blowing some stuff up. Like, seriously. Now, these changes are not going to be small. Some of you will laugh. Okay, getting more work done takes clearing some space. In a world of continuous growth, we need continuous acceleration if we're going to keep up. Eventually, we fall behind and we get disrupted. One of the ways we've automated our work is with analytics. When I first started 20-ish years ago, I had 2 analysts on my team, and every week they would query a bunch of data and mash it together and make it flat and then hook it up to Excel and then make some charts and then take those charts and put them in PowerPoint, and then they would email that PowerPoint to me every Sunday night. That was the Monday morning status report. I would look at it every week and I would use it to make decisions about the business, and that was great. But along the way, they said, hey, I'm doing this 5 days a week, every week. I could actually just make a script that gets the data out of the database and then ETL it and automatically transform stuff and put it together and then connect it to Power BI or Datadog or whatever you like for analytics. And now all of a sudden, that Monday morning status report isn't a Monday morning report, it's an anytime Dan wants it report. And that's pretty awesome. And those analysts, instead of having to do the same queries over and over again, now they're focused on trying to figure out what machine learning is, data science and AI. And so we took the work that those 2 people were doing repetitively every week until the end of time, and we made that go away. And that's a great example. Another example is the commute. I used to drive to the city for 90 minutes from the other side of Naperville into the city every day and then back at the end. That was 15 hours a week in the summertime. In the wintertime, it was like 20 hours. And then all of a sudden, COVID happened, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to do the same stuff but not drive 20 hours a week? That's kind of amazing. Now, I do like offices. I want to collaborate with people. I want to go to lunch with people. I want to become friends with them. I want whiteboards. Those things are all awesome. So I'm not saying get rid of commutes completely, but that's one of the ways I could look at my week and say, I just created like 15 free hours that I didn't have before. Whole reason I have this presentation now is because of that free time. So find those pockets of time and start blowing them up, figuring out ways of making them go away. So one of the things I want to suggest is a no meeting week. So I did something amazing in the spring that was really cool. I told everybody that I worked for, that I was going on vacation, but then I didn't go. I just stopped looking at email. I didn't go to meetings. I just declined everything. And then I like redid my whole product strategy. Like I did some research, like I looked at other examples in the world. I had like 40 free hours that I didn't have before. I never would have done that. And they were 40 hours in a row. It was great. I came back the next Monday and told my boss, like, hey, I didn't actually go away. I'm probably going to take that vacation time back. But look at all this stuff I made. And they were like, oh my God, that's actually kind of awesome. And so we said, let's do a no meeting week for the whole team. So now I know some people are doing no meeting days, and that's helpful, like in no meeting Wednesday, and everyone gets deep work. But what happens when you do a no meeting Wednesday is all the meetings just go to Tuesdays and Thursdays. You're not creating any new space, although defragging Wednesday is a good idea. It does help. It gets you deep into work, and that's fine. But if you do it for a week, then the meetings actually do disappear. And then some interesting stuff about autonomy starts to surface. How many of your people can actually go a whole week without asking people for permission to do stuff? And autonomy is a different subject, so I won't go into that much more here. But try no meeting week as a team. It's really cool. You'll do it more often. I started doing it one week a month was a no meeting week, and it was phenomenal. Okay, so another thing that's going to accelerate the way we all do stuff is GPT. So AI is huge right now. It will change everything about everything. It's as fundamental as electricity. But a lot of people are thinking, okay, generative AI, it's going to like just do all the work for us. And that's actually fundamentally false. There is always work left over for the humans. You just have to pay attention to like which part of the work you're talking about. And so I started dissecting work to try to figure this out. And I call this the hierarchy of work. We start at the bottom. It's a pyramid because there's more of this stuff, right? At the bottom, we have mimicry. That's when you do something over that you saw done before. And next, you have memorization, where you have to remember stuff that you learned in school, regardless of what age that was. And then pattern matching is where you see problems that are already known problems with known solutions. And it's like if you're in tech support and you have a book and somebody calls in with that problem and you're like, oh, do this. That's pattern matching. Not actually problem solving, although they start to blur together. Problem solving is when you have to create a new solution to something that doesn't have a known solution. That's where you start to outgrow what AI can do. AI can reassemble interesting pattern matches that they found, and they might look like new problems, but AI can't tell what good is. It doesn't know how to do the things above. I'm sorry, I'm going to skip that part. It doesn't know how to do the stuff above that line, because AI fundamentally has to be trained by examples. And if it's an example, then it's pattern matching. Now, things above that line are AI is going to get better, and we're going to mix more and more things together, and we're going to realize when people are trying to do problem solving or discovery, they're really just doing pattern matching too. But for now, that's a pretty hard line that AI can't cross. So try to dissect what your day looks like and figure out how to make this stuff go away. If you automate 80% of the stuff down here, that leaves 20% left. And so you could do 5 times as much of the stuff at the top. That's where the real value is, and your customers are going through the same growth. So if your customers are coming into your product and filling out some form that they have to then take over here and answer more questions, if you automate that stuff down here for them as well, so it's going to go away eventually. Somebody is going to make that stuff disappear for your customers, and it might as well be you. Okay, so some of the other people will try to do some of these interesting things. We're saying we're gonna take AI to blow stuff up, and it's gonna be awesome. And then your bosses are gonna say, yeah, but we're not a software company. I worked at McKinsey, and people said this to me all the time. I was like, I took a 10-week healthcare engagement, and I made it take 1 week to produce. And the first thing they said was, wait, we get paid by the hour. Don't do that anymore. But the second thing they said was, we're not a software company. Like, we don't have the technologists to keep this alive. Like, how are we going to keep this running? Every company is a technology company. Technology used to be a sector or an industry or whatever you call it, but now it's just the new way people do work. Kids are technologists, right? It's so fundamental, it's like talking. Like, no one would ever say, our team, we don't really talk to each other. We're not a communications company. But people think like that about technology. So start building technology into everything you do. Here's an example of somebody doing that. There's a guy named Scott. That's not actually Scott in the yellow jacket, but it's one of Scott's customers. Scott worked in the timber industry. And when you get a bunch of logs in a pile like that, you have to measure each one and then grade it. You have to grade, like, what's the quality of this wood? How many boards can we get out of it? Is it straight? Scott made an iPhone app in a weekend that would look at logs and measure and grade them with the one click of a button. And it stored it in a database. Now, historically, these measurements would be written in a logbook, and that logbook gets wet and muddy, and it's disgusting. It was hugely inefficient. If anybody tried to buy a 2x4 in the year 2020, you understand how important and messed up the logistics industry for timber was. So as a result of the price of a 2x4 going to like $19, Scott made this iPhone app, and it dramatically changed the efficiency of timber. Every single log in the world uses this app now, and he made it in a weekend. If he can be a technologist, every single everyone on your teams can be technologists too. So dissect your work, figure out like where are you on that spectrum? Which of the work are you doing is mimicry and memorization and pattern matching? This thing is called time flip. I'm not affiliated. There's a bunch of other time management things too, but this is pretty cool. You just turn the cube, and whichever side is up is like time tracking for you. So you can keep track of like, when am I in meetings? When am I at lunch? Whatever. It's pretty cool. Do that and map the work that you're doing and figure out like where are the pockets of time that you could blow up and make go away. Now, we did no meeting weeks a little bit ago. When you're doing a no meeting week, one of the things that could happen is all the stuff that was said in meetings just gets emailed to people in big, long threads, and that's actually worse. So when I'm doing a no meeting week, I also do a no email week. Everyone's quiet, everyone's focused. It's amazing. You realize that most email is about the past. It's not helping you go forward. And I stopped looking at email 10 months ago at Google. I just didn't go there anymore. Occasionally, I didn't delete them. They were there. Occasionally someone would say, oh my God, did you see that email? And I would go like find the one they meant. It didn't matter. No one noticed. I didn't look at email and no one noticed. Because the stuff that's in my email, we're also talking about in meetings. And even when I send my boss an email about like how my project is going, she asks me anyway what the status is or what's wrong or what can I help with. A lot of the conversation that's happening in email and meetings could go away and you might not notice. That can create 20, 25, 32 hours in your week. So seriously look at what your time distribution is and think about maybe blowing it up. So those are some of the fundamental ways you can get better at adapting and accelerating across your team. Those things are hard, but you can get there gradually, a little bit at a time, small experiments. If you figure that out, we live in the most exciting time there's ever been. Like, our phone is 425 million times faster than the Apollo guidance system. And actually, Apple just announced an update last week, so that stat is already out of date. That's amazing. At the same time, like the sushi robot near my house will bring me my food and refill my water glass. It's incredible. Salman Khan is reinventing the way students get tutored and the way educators create lesson plans. This is Khan Academy, if you're not familiar. My car drove itself here to work with no interventions. I did not touch the steering wheel until I got into the parking garage. Dean Kamen, inventor famously of the Segway, is building human kidneys in a 3D printer in New Hampshire with the patient's own stem cells. So they're harvesting stem cells of people that need kidney transplants, using those cells to make a kidney so the patient doesn't reject it after transplant. Like, there's some incredible stuff going on in the world. This is Zipline. A friend of mine, Paul, is an investor with Zipline, and they are ferrying medical supplies around Africa with drones. A lot of places in Africa that don't have adequate refrigeration for medical supplies, and this can get medical supplies to people that were just going without it before. There's some amazing stuff going on in the world, and there's more coming. We're about to have the AI revolution, and then the robot revolution, and then whatever other revolutions come after that. And if you figure out how to spend your time focused on those things, instead of just reading or responding to emails and writing strategy docs that are going to change in 4 months anyway. You don't know what the future looks like. So stop trying to write a 3-year future doc because it's not real. Like Chris said earlier, it's fiction. Reinventing teams takes these things. And if you get better at these things, changing becomes way easier because you're great at it. Accelerating the things you're trying to do becomes easier because you're getting rid of the dumb stuff. This is part of a bigger program. I can't go into all of this stuff today, but these are the things that really, really, really matter on teams. And there's a lot of detail in there. If you scan that QR code, I'll email you the whole deck and then you'll have all that stuff. So, and I'd also love your feedback. So this will ask you a couple questions. So that's it. I had a question over there. Um, 100% true. It is going to reveal the fundamental underlying problem. I think the fundamental underlying problem is some of the people on your team don't have any autonomy. Without the meeting, they can't do anything. And so if you, a slide that didn't make it in this deck, but if you ask your boss, like, what can I do without telling anyone? Which is also a great interview question. If you're interviewing to work somewhere, ask your boss, your future boss, or your CEO or whatever, what can I, if I join this team, what am I in charge of? Like, what can I do without asking anyone? That answer for a lot of people is nothing. We want you to tell us about everything. We want to help you make the right decisions. There are some decisions that need to be made by multiple people, but it's not every single one of them. And so that's part of what I believe, at least. Yes.
Thanks. Thank you. It seems like the main goal behind the no meetings and the no email week is just how do we eliminate distractions and unnecessary things that we're doing every day and week. Curious just how your opinion is on other communication tools that might feel distracting sometimes, whether that's slacking someone all day or other things that we're using that you feel might be taking up or disrupting actual valuable time.
Yeah, for sure. I think you have to dig into that because the first thing that happens when you, like I said with email and meetings, if you make meetings go away, people just start sending email. And if you take email away, then people start using Teams or Slack or whatever, right? And they're just moving the communication. And so it is about giving people some space to discover what their own autonomy is. That's really important. I do believe though, for question asking, I think you should take a break from, if you're shutting email down, shut down Slack too, just for a little bit, right? Not forever. But status sharing, I think, should just always be tools. Your work in whatever you're using to manage tasks. If you just make that more public, so the people that want an understanding of what's happening and what's not happening, they should be able to look at some kind of dashboard that shows the progress of that work. I'm a little biased because I worked on JIRA, but that's my opinion.
Awesome. Also, where do you get sushi that I can get the robot to come by?
Yeah. There's it's out near just past Meadowbrook, out there by Lamont. I think it's Lamont.
Hi, I talked to you at the beginning.
Hello, Joseph.
Hello. What was I gonna, so when you do your 4-day super learning periods, how do you structure that? Do you treat it like a work day? Do you kind of keep it more chill? And like when you say self-directed, is it like watching YouTube videos? Is it reading? Like, how do you think about it?
So a couple things. I think maybe on teams, some people learn in different ways, and so applying too much structure is bad, but you should make sure it's not just a blow-off week. Like, people are taking it seriously. There's an output expected at the end of that week. What I do mean about self-directed, though, is some teams will, as a team, decide the thing we need to learn next. And they'll pick like whatever. Let's say we're going to try to figure out what OpenAI does. So we're all going to learn that now. But they're trying to make the decision about what to learn before anyone has learned it. And so that's the important thing. Like, move the decision making out of the process so that people have some creative control to figure out, like, what is the thing they want to learn. That they're interested in. You want a lot of people to all be learning different things. So that's important. You could still add structure, so there's some things that are okay and some things aren't, but allow for some diversity in the learning. That is really important. Different teams will have different budgets for learning. Like, some people will say, anything you can get on the internet for free is the scope of this. Other people will say, we have this subscription to LearnCore or whatever the training tool might be. Like, those kinds of things are important factors, and they're different for every business.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think a ton of us probably subscribe to all of this, but part of the problem in the company is, of our companies, are other managers and stakeholders who are kind of stuck in the old managerial ways. How can we go about kind of teaching that old dog some new tricks?
Yeah, fantastic question. And the crux that could blow up all of this, right? If you can't convince the stakeholders that are feeling like they're the deciders in how you work, then none of these ideas will matter. The first thing is, in most of the experiments that I tried, I just did it first without asking for permission. And then I came back and I said, this was the output of the last week, and here's how I got that much output. And so trying some small experiments that are sort of more under the covers helps, because if you go in there with useful output and an argument, then it's easier than just saying, I have a hypothesis that if I didn't have to talk to any of my coworkers, I would get a lot more done. Yeah.
I like that.
Thanks. Also, I do coaching and consulting, so if your boss needs trouble coming around, let me know and I'll help convince him.
Any other questions?
Back to Joseph.
Who do you think will win in the generative AI space? Do you think OpenAI will win because of their early lead and their technical talent, or do you think they will run out of money and some other company will beat them?
Fantastic questions. First, I think there's, just like the world wants Visa and MasterCard. They don't trust having all their eggs in one basket that's that critically important. So I think there will be a multiverse of AI tools. I think the head start's also debatable because Google practitioners were working on AI things like 35 years ago. But there will be a reckoning of some kind. What will really come to change the market is when people start passing the cost of running AI queries onto the people running them. Like, my wife uses ChatGPT like all the time. She uses it like 8 times a day. But as soon as she discovered that it costs like $1.50 every time she asks what she should say in this Facebook post, like, she's going to stop doing that, right? So at some point, the cost of this will become clear, and that how people handle the market of that will really matter. All the technologists have great strengths that they bring to the table, but maybe the one that's better at marketing and sales will win, and maybe that's Microsoft. Right. Yeah, all the chat GPT for free enthusiasm is fake. It doesn't tell us anything, right? So, well, it'll be interesting to see.
Joseph? All right, any other questions? Yep.
So if you give your team freedom for learning, though, do you occasionally have problems where they would learn something that's not at all helpful or relevant to the business? And do you have to put some reins on it every once in a while?
It's probably so one of the things in my learning demo day is like you have to answer the question like how is this going to help our business? Like that's one of the outputs. And so when you make that the expectation going in, people don't venture off on too many crazy tangents. There's a lot of stuff though that seems irrelevant that might be helpful. So I wouldn't put too strict of a guideline around that. Like give people the opportunity to try and show like how they think this might be useful before you lock it down completely. And then if people are abusing that, then start to rein it back in. And you don't have to start with a week learn-a-thon either. You could do like Friday afternoon, so.
All right, here we go.
Well, at the top, you talked about how this is like a 3-day presentation that you crammed. And so I'm curious, like, are there other insights you'd like to share with us, part of your broader presentation?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, we talk a little bit about autonomy in some of these tangents about how when you shut email down or when you stop going to meetings, you start to discover like who's just stuck waiting because they don't actually have permission to go 5 days without working. Like improving the autonomy and dividing autonomy appropriately across levels of your organization is one of the things that we would go into. The other thing is like how you're structuring the levels of your organization. So there are some studies that show that 1 to 5 is the optimal ratio of a manager to their team. When you start to get 8 or 15 people, the manager doesn't really know the details of all the stuff. They're not getting the coaching they need, and so as you start adding if you believe that 1 to 5 ratio, then you start adding all these levels. Your organization starts getting really tall, and then your people that your boss's boss wants to know what's going on in the business, and they can't because there's no way of knowing that except looking at 9,000 JIRA tickets, right? And that's not going to happen. I mean, the main reason that's actually not a problem is because they shouldn't need to know what's in 9,000 JIRA tickets, right? Imagine we're at a soccer game and like the owner of the team keeps like running down the field and asking the forward like what they're going to do next. And is that okay? Like, I mean, the other team could take the ball. Like that sounds kind of risky. Like it just doesn't work like that. You have to give people and I'm not a sports guy, so I don't actually use sports analogies very much, but that one's just really clear. Like you've got to let your team, the owner's job is to get resources for the team, right? And the coach's job is to give the team the right preparation they need to do that game. But then you've got to let the team do the game. So those are some of the things.
So what's interesting is I actually worked for Dan about a decade ago, and he actually talked about some of these topics way back then. So it is interesting to start to see some of these things come to fruition. My question is as I try to expand my skill set in just being a product manager or just product professional, I feel like everybody's asking for a unicorn. It's really hard to understand what's next and what are you going to be good at or where you can compete. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about learning, reserving time, my brain is swimming right now like, okay, well, ChatGPT or AI or what else or strategy, right? So any recommendations?
Yeah, I think so. First, at the beginning, I had that sort of staircase that sort of went up the chain. Like, don't dive right into AI when you're still trying to figure out what like data in the cloud looks like, what data is actually there to use, and what's reliable and what's not. Like, start working your way up that staircase. I do think that a conversational understanding of AI is going to be really important for all of us, because it's starting to make interfaces go away. Like, people are skipping over our interfaces and just asking for the output that they want. Search results like Bing and Google are just, they're not even going to the websites anymore. They still give you the list, but they summarize everything they find. And that's going to change how we think about interfaces. And so start exploring a little bit there so that you understand what that might look like.
Okay, I mean, at the 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Since you've been with like big enterprises and consulted to big enterprises, do you feel that this is more applicable to smaller enterprises that actually can implement this, as opposed to the large enterprises, which have a lot of bosses and stakeholders to feed?
So first, I think there are only teams. Like a large enterprise is just a collection of a bunch of teams. Like, a large enterprise cares about the things all their teams are doing, but there's actually no such thing as a 4,000 person project, right? It's a collection of smaller components. And so as you optimize the stuff that's going on in the smaller pockets, then it will roll up and just benefit the larger stakeholders. But you do have to wonder, like, you know, if you're whatever, I'm getting up there in ages, and like I might hire somebody on my team that is a digital native, like they grew up with cell phones and iPads and on the internet. Like, they know way more about new technologies than I do. And so, like, as I become, you know, more senior in my life, I can't make all the decisions. I need to let some of the people that are closer to those new technologies make those decisions. And so that's the biggest advice I have for larger organizations. First, optimize for small teams and their effectiveness, and then you'll roll up the benefit. And then second, look at the role sort of decision making across enterprises with lots of hierarchy.
About automating things that you can, tasks that you can, and like you mentioned, like status on projects or whatever you're working on. And I know you said you were a little bit biased towards Atlassian because you had worked with them. We use that. I was just wondering, like, which of those products would you recommend, or how did you use that for those tasks?
So for anyone that's not familiar with JIRA, it's just like a list of tasks, and you could use Linear or Notion or Asana or Teams, or any of those tools will let you put a list of work in a list and share that list. And so I don't actually have a bias toward any one of them in particular. Actually, maybe JIRA is the hardest to administer and set up, so you have to sort of dedicate it to wanting that. So like, if you want a lightweight thing for a smaller team, maybe pick one of the other ones. The important thing is that people start putting the work that they're trying to do in a list that's prioritized. If they start doing that, then other people can look at the list of work that's done and not done. And then it starts to get easier to understand what's going on in an organization. Now, all of the tools are broken in how they allow you to roll up from a list of a bunch of granular things to an overview. Right now, that's really hard. You can create like themes or epics, or they all call them something different. AI is about to solve that problem. Like, AI is about to look at a list of 9,000 tasks and give you a summary of what's going on and what's not. But that only works if you're putting that data somewhere. So put it somewhere. Yes?
So they always say you do what is measured. So in this particular thesis, did you measure at all learning time or things that the folks are doing as output?
I think I might have some contradictory opinions about data. There's no data about the future. And so focusing a bunch of stuff on what happened in the past doesn't really help me. And so I do optimize for value and stuff that feels like successes, right? Like I want to leave for a pretend vacation and come back with a revised strategy that all my team loves, right? But that's not data exactly, but you know it when you see it, right? Things you do for customers is also sometimes really clear. When you're focused on data, it's about like optimizing and tweaking the efficiency, right? It's not going to get you somewhere dramatically different than you have today. But when you have a system that's running and you're trying to optimize it, you need that data-driven, incremental, constant improvements. That's great too, but that's not typically where I'm focused.
I think you misunderstood.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of, so we're saying like learning time is needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so to operationalize it, I've always seen you got to put a goal out there to measure, are people actually spending time to do these things that could prepare some of the innovative ideas or learning. Do the companies in the past and your team, did you say, I really need you to do this, or
Yeah, I think coming up with a framework for measuring the usefulness of new things to learn is probably important. I have not done that. Like we have, sent people off in lots of different directions to try to figure out like which things should we use or which things should we not use. Or when we have an idea about, to Joseph's question a second ago, like which we're going to start using AI, should we do, the Google Palm model or should we use the OpenAI? Like that's a thing we would like send 2 teams off to do and measure what they find and then make that a very controlled experiment. But when you're still just like exploring, it's hard to measure that stuff, right? So maybe divide up the learning time and say like, 40% of your learning time has to be spent on things that can be measured and I don't know, some other distribution, right?
I think we have maybe one, last question for the day.
So, I'm interested to learn more about the meeting week,
Uh-huh.
particularly like for teams that practice agile, and we have, daily stands. So would you recommend us not attend daily stand or any agile ceremony during that particular week?
I think stand-up meetings can sometimes be an exception if they're really small. Like if they're really like 10-minute stand-ups, then, and they're first thing in the morning, so they're not like disrupting people and pulling them out of work and doing it at 11 a.m. like that. Those are kind of a problem. But you can also sometimes just do an asynchronous stand-up where everyone just posts like, here's what I did yesterday, here's what I'm going to do today. Just put that in Slack or Teams. That gets you by a little bit. So, try it both ways and see which way works for your team. Definitely share the information. That I think is important for agile teams.
Oh, kind of get close, mate. Go ahead, go on. Yeah, 3 minutes late. People want to get a happy hour.
Yeah, right.
I think something, oh my God, that's loud. Something as product people we should try to practice to do a lot is not be afraid to challenge and say, why did we have this meeting? It's something we tend to just accept. Like, I think something I've realized, at least in my experience over the last decade, is I was the problem and I was causing a lot of meetings because I needed updates. I don't want to do the show of hands because I think a lot of people will agree with me, but like that turns the reflection around, especially with engineering teams, and that helps cut like probably half the meetings I've dealt with. And asynchronous is definitely a way, using the tools and the notes and the things we're anyways tracking. If it's a meeting about a meeting to have another meeting, like the cascade is terrible. And especially it doubles when you're dealing with executives and people you're communicating to. So that's something that I would suggest.
Yeah, don't be afraid to say this conversation is keeping us from happy hour and we should stop it.
Dan, thank you.